I grew up in a small town in the Ottawa Valley, and for the longest time our rabbit ear antennas that sat atop our basement television only got a handful of channels. CBC, CBC French, CTV from Ottawa, and sometimes TVO. But the channel that came in the most clearly was CHRO, a small CBC affiliate that broadcast from Pembroke. Where CHRO set itself apart was that every night they showed classic films. Every Saturday, I would scour the TV guide for the upcoming week, seeing what films were coming up and reading the blurbs that had described them. And one night, there was a film coming up that I couldn't resist. The Mummy's Hand. Now, it was going to be shown on a school night, and I was 10, so staying up late to watch it was out of the question. But my parents offered me a deal. If I went to bed early, I could set an alarm, wake up, watch the movie, and then go back to bed. But I couldn't complain about being tired in the morning or make a fuss about going to school. I leapt at the deal. Went to bed at 8 p.m. Well, I tried to. I was a bit too excited to go right to sleep. And I got up to a silent house at 11:55, crept to the basement rec room and watched The Mummy's Hand, feeling like I was doing something forbidden, something remarkable. This is what Carter felt like finding King Tut's tomb, I thought. In truth, the movie was so-so, and I was totally tired at school the next day, but I got hooked on the process, and over the next few years this became a thing for me. Find out what was coming on in the week ahead, plan my schedule accordingly. I probably slept through more films than I watched, but the hooks were in. First, it was just old monster movies, then old sci-fi, then crime stories, and war films, and eventually, as I found favorite actors and directors, my tastes really broadened. I still do this now, but I'm probably guilty of staying up later than I should. Something about watching an old black and white film on TV, interrupted by commercials, while I lie on the couch. It takes me back to a simpler time, a time when I was just beginning to learn that I love old movies. Hello, humans who enjoy films. I'm Derek, and I love old movies. We've got Sam the Sidekick here.
Hello. Welcome to episode 5.
I am a bit surprised we got this far.
Oh yeah, this was unlikely. I mean, 1 was unlikely, but this?
Not remotely predictable.
No.
But people are listening.
Indeed they are. Actual people out there in the internetverse are giving our little podcast a listen, and that is really, really cool.
So cool.
All the cool.
So thank you, folks. We hope you keep listening. And since you're here, why not take a moment to hit like, share, and subscribe? It's the best way for more people to find out about what we're doing. So if you're enjoying this, definitely don't keep it to yourself.
We aren't a secret. You can tell other people.
And you know what? Don't be shy about getting in touch. You can reach us and find some content on all the socials.
Sure you can.
For example, the Instagram,
I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
the Facebook,
I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
or drop us an email.
I Love Old Movies, the podcast @gmail.com.
All one word.
And now you can listen to audio-only versions of our show like a real proper podcast.
That's because you can now find us on the Anchor.
That's at anchor.fm/I Love Old Movies.
It's easy and fun to do.
So, no Frankenstein today? I feel like we were really focused on Frankenstein for a while there.
Yeah, no. We are definitely moving on. New genre, new actors, new everything. And this time we are casting our gaze upon one of our favorite genres of film, the Western.
There are so many great Westerns. I'm pretty sure the first old movie I really loved was a Western.
It was. Do you remember which one it was?
I want to say True Grit, but I don't think that's right. It was John Wayne, though, right?
It was. In fact, it was The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
I gotta say, I don't really remember that.
It is true.
I'll take your word for it. And James Stewart? He's in that too?
And Lee Marvin.
Geez, no wonder I loved it. How old was I?
About 5, I'd say. And you wanted to see another movie with John Wayne as soon as we could.
That was True Grit.
Right.
When did the Magnificent Seven get involved in all this?
A bit later, maybe a year. And then that film was on like a monthly rotation in our house. You always wanted to watch it.
I love Westerns.
And we are doing one.
Not John Wayne, though. I feel like we could do McClintock or Honda.
We could, but we are not. We are taking a look at The Lawless Breed from 1952, starring Rock Hudson.
Now that is a movie star name.
Oh, yeah.
And this isn't some normal run-of-the-mill Western, is it?
Not exactly. In fact, it might even qualify as a biopic. The Lawless Breed tells the story of one of the legendary gunfighter outlaws of the Wild West.
Cool.
Told in his own words.
Whoa, what, seriously?
Absolutely. The film is based on John Wesley Hardin's autobiography, which he wrote in prison. It's called The Life of John Wesley Hardin, as written by himself.
A bit on the nose, but I'll allow it.
The book is considered to be wildly exaggerated and filled with details that defy corroboration, and it isn't considered to be 100% accurate. But the film followed the book closely enough that Hardin himself gets a writing credit on the film, making him almost certainly the only gunfighter from the Wild West to have his own IMDb page.
That is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Take that, Billy the Kid. Okay, this will be great. Let's set it up.
Our director for The Lawless Breed is none other than Hollywood legend Raoul Walsh. Walsh was an assistant director, editor, and actor under D.W. Griffith on Birth of a Nation, actually playing John Wilkes Booth. With Griffith's tutelage, Walsh became a top director for the next 40 years, his acting career effectively ending when a car accident involving a rabbit cost him the use of his right eye. Some of his more notable films include High Sierra, which was critical in the career of Humphrey Bogart, as well as They Died with Their Boots On and Gentleman Jim, both with Errol Flynn. His crown jewel film is almost certainly 1949's White Heat with Jimmy Cagney, which is still seen as a classic in the crime film genre. And for our Canadian listeners, you'll be glad to know that Walsh also directed the 1955 film Saskatchewan, with Alan Ladd as an RCMP officer.
Does he get his man?
Mounties always get their man, even when Alan Ladd plays them. Walsh's friendship with Errol Flynn ran especially deep until a falling out prevented the two from working together again, although Walsh was still one of the pallbearers at Flynn's funeral. Walsh himself died in 1980 at the age of 93.
The screenplay writer for our film is Bernard Gordon. He was a writer and producer, perhaps best known for his sci-fi B films, such as Zombies of Moratau, 1957, The Man Who Turned to Stone, 1957, and Earth vs. the Flying Saucers, 1956. Gordon was active politically and was in fact a card-carrying member of the Communist Party in the 1940s.
Uh-oh, I see where this is going.
The Lawless Breed was only his second film, but after it was released, Gordon was subpoenaed to testify to the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, investing communist influence in Hollywood.
And there it is.
But Gordon never wound up being called to testify. This is because William Allen, the producer of The Lawless Breed, had whistleblown on Gordon in his own testimony.
Yup, save your own skin there, Bill.
Allen was an informant for the HUAC and kept the government informed on the politics of the writers he worked with at Universal.
Yeah, of course he did.
Blacklisted by the HUAC so early in his career, Gordon only wound up with 19 writing credits in Hollywood, the most notable film being the star-studded 55 Days at Peking in 1963.
Now, our big star, as mentioned, is Rock Hudson. And what a star he is.
You've got me hyped up for this guy.
At 6 feet 5 inches and possessed with ridiculous handsomeness, the incredibly photogenic Hudson was signed to a contract with Universal and given extensive training in acting, singing, dancing, horseback riding, and fencing. He appeared in 12 films in a variety of smaller roles until being promoted to leading man by the studio for The Scarlet Angel in 1952. The Lawless Breed was Hudson's third film as a lead, and it's a nice look at him at an early point in his career. He largely made westerns and adventure stories before appearing in Magnificent Obsession in 1954 and having his career truly take off, being named the most popular movie star of that year, a list which he remained on the top 10 of until 1964, topping it several times. By the end of the decade, Hudson was making the first of a series of romantic comedy films with Doris Day, Pillow Talk, and this sort of film defined his career into the 60s. By the 1970s, Hudson was moving into television, most notably with Macmillan and Wife, and his highly publicized guest role on 80s nighttime soap opera Dynasty before his death in 1985. He was 59 years old.
Sounds like he was really big.
And he could have been bigger. In the late 50s, he signed on to a production of A Farewell to Arms, which was hoped to be a big hit. The film flopped, though, and attention turned to the 3 films that Hudson turned down to make Arms, and thoughts of what might have been couldn't be avoided.
What roles did he turn down?
Well, Marlon Brando's role in Sayonara, William Holden's role in Bridge on the River Kwai,
Whoa.
and, I don't even know if I believe this, but apparently Charlton Heston's role as Moses in the Ten Commandments. No wonder he referred to A Farewell to Arms as the biggest mistake of his career.
I'll say. Any awards?
Plenty. While he was only nominated for 1 Oscar, Best Actor for Giant, he won many festival awards, as well as prizes from European film academies. He won 4 consecutive Golden Globes for Favorite Male Film Star in the World.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I don't know if Julie Adams can compare to all that, but she was Rock Hudson's co-star in The Lawless Breed. Billed alternately as Betty Adams or Julia Adams, Julie Adams appeared in a series of films in the 1950s before largely transitioning to television, consistently appearing in guest spots or reoccurring roles in an incredible variety of shows, from the mid-50s to the 2000s.
50 years of TV appearances? I had no idea.
The Lawless Breed was just one of a long line of westerns that Adams appeared in during the early 50s, but she is probably best remembered by film fans for her role as Kay Lawrence in Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh, right. I didn't even make that connection.
Her last recurring roles on television were in 1993, when she did guest spots on Murder, She Wrote and Beverly Hills 90210. And fans of the show Lost might remember her as Amelia. Her last film, a short, was released in 2018 before her passing away the next year at the age of 92.
That's incredible.
During her time making westerns, she got to play opposite some of the biggest male stars of the day. Not only Rock Hudson, but James Stewart, Glenn Ford, and Tyrone Power. And actually, this is not the only time Julie Adams and Rock Hudson appeared together.
Oh, no?
They turned up in 5 movies together between 1951 and 1955, and Julie did a guest spot on Macmillan and Wife in the 70s.
All right. Now, of The Lawless Breed, Variety magazine said, "The plot unfolds episodically and swiftly, telling how Hardin earned his reputation as a killer after getting his first victim in self-defense, goes on the lam from the law, and vengeance-seeking kinfolks is forced into more killings." That's a pretty fair description. But it's important to remember that this is a very fictionalized and biased account of John Wesley Hardin's life. In actuality, history recalls Hardin as a violent and alcohol-fueled sociopath who killed many people for a variety of reasons, perhaps most infamously for snoring too loudly.
So don't piss this guy off is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, for starters. And here's the kicker. Supposedly, Hardin killed a man for the first time at the age of 15. And when he was sent off to jail, he was only 23.
Yes, jail, where he wrote an autobiography and became a lawyer, and got released early and pardoned.
And upon release, promptly killed another man before being straight up murdered in cold blood by a lawman.
Wild West.
Yeah.
But we're not going to try to compare the film to Hardin's actual life, or even the fictionalized life presented in his autobiography, are we? We're just going to look at the film?
No promises. But speaking of which, why don't we get to it?
Let's.
Okay, Sam, what's our tagline for this one?
He cut a swath of daring across the great Southwest.
Oh, did he now?
That's what it says.
And our ratings?
That's a big 6.3 on IMDb.
Middle of the road.
The Rotten Tomatoes audience score is 65%, and the tomato meter is unavailable. This film is available to watch on YouTube, and it won no awards.
Okay, let's get to work.
Oh yeah.
Can I just say quickly, I love the old Universal Planet thing. It looks so cool.
I agree. Totally nifty.
We open on title cards, presenting what we are about to see as a page from a book. That's because this movie is based on John Wesley Hardin's book.
That he wrote himself.
And took substantial creative license with.
And then filmmakers took license with that.
We have a few degrees of artistic interpretation here, which will separate this movie from actual facts fairly neatly.
Hey, you want facts? Go watch a documentary.
You want full-up pretend? Watch anything written by John Wesley Hardin.
The music is pretty crazy. Very old-fashioned adventure music. I like it.
A title card tells us that this movie is about the bad men of the West. We find ourselves at Huntsville Prison, 1896. John Wesley Hardin, West to his friends, gets out of jail. He shakes hands with the warden, and they are so friendly.
Friend!
Warden, friend!
Huntsville redemption, friend!
West sees a young horse and goes to pet it, but it pulls away from his touch, rejecting him altogether. Folks, this is a foreshadow. Remember this.
Wes drops off the manuscript for his autobiography at a printer's and just walks away. And as the printer reads the pages, the film becomes a memory story, narrated by the book itself as it's being read.
We get some quick backstory. After the Civil War, Texas saw itself as independent. The whole noble Southerner versus horrible Yankee shtick is in full effect, with Wes's brother still wearing his rebel jacket years after the war.
I notice Civil War stuff comes up a lot in old westerns.
A lot. And usually from a point of view that makes the South come off pretty positively. It's a bad look, and it hasn't aged well.
I'll say.
When we first see young Wes, he's practicing shooting, and he's pretty good at it. But then his fire and brimstone Southern Baptist preacher father doesn't like this, so he just horsewhips Wes.
Wes likes two things: guns and gambling.
Well, three things. He also likes Janie Brown, the orphan girl that lives with his family. He has a dream to marry her and buy a ranch and raise horses. This is the life dream he talks about all the time. He just needs a bit of startup money, and then the dream can come true.
And his plan for getting that money? Well, it's connected back to the guns and the gambling.
But there is another girl in Wes's life, Rosie the saloon gal. She's pretty sweet on Wes, and he visits her saloon to get into a card game. The dealer tries to cheat Wes, but Wes cheats better and wins a huge amount of money. This leads the dealer to draw guns on Wes, and Wes shoots him dead. This should be pretty cut and dried according to my understanding of the Code of the West. The other guy drew first. Wes killed him in self-defense. The occupying Yankee soldiers don't see it that way, though, and neither do the card player's three brothers. So Wes needs to run for it, possibly killing some soldiers during his escape.
I feel like that whole card game was a setup. Wes went there to cheat, prepared to kill someone if they caught him. He blasted that guy without a second thought and wasn't sorry one bit. It feels like he planned to just go murder that guy.
No one in the saloon will rat on Wes, but the three brothers, the Hanleys, one of them played by Lee Van Cleef, master of the beady-eyed sneer, plan to hunt Wes down and take revenge upon him.
It didn't go so well for their brother.
Wes joins up with his uncle and cousins and takes part in a cattle drive headed to Abilene so he can lay low while the heat is on.
More card games break out, and everyone is always cheating. Wes wins the horse Rondo from a fellow cowboy. Rondo is some kind of horse, although it's not a very tall horse, so when super tall Rock Hudson rides him, it looks a bit weird.
In Abilene, Wes gets to a drinkin' and a gamblin', and wants to buy Jane a special wedding dress. But the Hanleys have caught up with him, and we're going to have a showdown in Abilene. Dirk Hanley wants Wes, one-on-one.
Wes is gonna kill him.
Wes totally kills him. It isn't close.
I called it. Wes 2, Hanley's 0.
And Wes just goes back to having fun. He takes it so easy when he kills people. Almost like he doesn't care much.
Because he's a sociopath.
But you know who does care? Wild Bill Hickok, who comes to arrest him. But instead, Wes is given an hour to leave town. But he wants to wait for the dress to be ready.
Stubborn Wes. These saloon scenes are great, though. Really colorful and lively.
When the dress is ready, he still won't leave. He wants to keep playing cards right up until there is 1 minute left in his hour.
Ugh. I don't even like this guy anymore. What is he doing?
You'd think there would be a more sympathetic portrayal of Wes going on. He comes off as a total asshole, uncompromising and obstinate.
I feel like Wes Hardin is a dick. Anyone reading the book and judging for themselves will come to that conclusion. The movie is making the events look like he never had another choice, but when he does make choices, they're selfish.
Wes returns home to reunite with Jane, the dress in hand. Romantic music swells. His preacher dad suggests that Wes give himself up, get a good lawyer, maybe bribe a judge, and beat the rap. Wes needs to give up all his farm money. He had saved $1,200 from the gambling and cattle drive, but he needs more, since the crooked judge wants $2,000. So it's off to the horse races to make money with Rondo.
Being addicted to gambling is a big problem for Wes. There's a lot of easy come, easy go, which he takes in stride, but makes everyone around him a bit nervous.
Rosie comes to see the races. She's still pretty sweet on Wes, and in a totally badass moment, she sits in a wagon in a beautiful dress, drinking beer from a fishbowl-sized goblet.
All class.
Wes wins the $800 he needs and more, but the Hanleys have plans too. Ike Hanley has brought a sheriff named Charlie Webb and paid him off to shoot Wes. Webb does this, shooting Wes in the back as he tries to walk away peacefully.
Peacefully. Sure.
Wes guns down Webb and Hanley in the blink of an eye, and then he's back on the run.
Wes 3, Hanley 0.
Gotta get 'em all.
Like Pokemon.
Pokemon that hire sheriffs to shoot you in the back, but yes.
Wes runs home, and his dad says to him, "You're a plague on the earth, John Wesley." And at this point, surrendering is off the table, and dreams of bribed judges and fixed court cases have gone up in smoke.
Even Jane has given up on his dream. She thinks Wes is a killer, and she asks him, how do you feel when you kill? Do you feel bad? Or do you feel good?
During this family meeting, a posse shows up, and the shooting starts.
Wes gets shot again, escaping.
In the back again. I love how everyone is a dry, gulching, back-shooting coward, except Wes.
And Jane gets shot too.
Whoops. The posse's like, oh shit, we shot Jane. Cheese it! And Wes has been shot twice, in the back, and dragged by a horse, and is running away. What is going on? This is getting far-fetched.
Rosie shows up and tends to Wes. She's a good pal, and she helps him escape. She also breaks the news about Jane dying.
So, if you're looking for a new girlfriend...
Wes finds a way to make the tragedy of Jane's death all about him. He's really a self-centered guy. They couldn't get me, so they killed her, he says. Which isn't how it happened at all.
No, she literally ran into the line of fire and was hit by a stray shot intended for Wes.
It's not like the posse was like, welp, missed Wes, let's just shoot Jane instead.
To Wes, that's exactly how it was.
Wes and Rosie disappear and go on the lam and try to lay low. I mean, he kills the odd deputy here and there and gets the Texas Rangers after him, but for him that's pretty good. For 6 years, they go from town to town, running the same little scams, card playing and grifting. Wes still sells the dream of the horse ranch, but he never cashes in and gets it.
The Rangers catch up to them in Kansas City, and there's a shootout. Always with the shooting with him. And the gambling.
They escape again, and this time they disappear for good. And one day, in Pauland, Alabama, Wes gets his little farm.
After years, he finally did it.
Now, Rosie hates living on the farm, and she thinks Wes will just go back to gambling and killing. But Wes says he's changed, and he wants the farm life. And to show his intentions, Wes surprises Rosie with a ring and a parson, and they wed.
Meanwhile, every unsolved murder in the South is getting credited to Wes. The Rangers make plans to catch him once and for all. Rosie gets pregnant and sends a letter to Wes's dad with a return address.
Rosie, no!
The Rangers intercept this letter and find where Wes is.
The Rangers ambush Wes in the train station as he was on his way to go buy horses. He gets arrested and charged with the death of that sheriff, Charlie Webb, he killed way back when. But there is a witness problem. There are none. But regardless, he gets sentenced to 25 years in prison.
No witnesses. No actual evidence against him then? Wow, that's some frontier justice.
Wes says, maybe I did wrong. Maybe I deserve to be punished. But I'm no murderer.
Except for all those people he murdered.
Wes is dragged off to jail as his infant son looks on, and Rosie weeps piteously. And then Wes gets pardoned 16 years later by the governor, bringing us back to the start of the film. Wes returns to the farm now, and Rosie is so happy. Their son? Well, that's a different story.
Wes meets his son, John, who has Wes's old gun.
And seeing it triggers PTSD in Wes, reliving his violent life in a flash of images. So he goes and bitch slaps his son. The kid rides off, rejecting his touch.
Like the young horse.
Foreshadow paid off. But now, Wes is concerned that we have the son becomes the father situation going on. John goes to the saloon to get some whiskey, and some half-drunk cowboy starts picking on the kid. But Wes arrives before the gunplay happens.
And on cue, the bully shoots Wes in the back.
Ah, my back!
Not my back! Not again!
As Wes lays dying, it's time for fatherly wisdom and making John vow not to live a life of the gun.
Yes, very touching and poignant. But Wes doesn't die.
Nope, and the happy family goes home together.
So they were trying to make him seem like a better person at the end. I get it. But again, every time he had to make a decision in this film, he made the wrong one. The selfish one. I was glad when he went to jail.
Yeah, me too. I feel like seeing Wes actually get what's coming to him would have been a better note to end on. All right, let's not waste a moment. Let's get to pros and cons.
Here on this show, we don't actually give star ratings or thumbs up. We just list some things we liked and didn't like, and then make a recommendation on whether or not this is a film you should check out.
Quite so. Let's get to it. My pros. Number 1. The film is paced very quickly. In a movie with so much to criticize, the fact that it is over in a brisk 87 minutes is a mercy. No scene is long enough to overstay its welcome, and the slow parts get replaced with action fairly promptly. Number 2. Some of the supporting actors, such as John McIntyre, Forrest Lewis, Lee Van Cleef, and even Dennis Weaver, all played their roles well and added a lot of depth to a film that needed it. And 3. The cattle drive scene. I'm a sucker for those. One of my favorite westerns is Red River. Give me a bunch of cowboys, a massive herd, and a few hundred miles to traverse, and I'm a happy guy. Now my cons. Number 1 is Rock Hudson. Now, he's a movie star. But with his towering frame, he's just not believable as the historic John Wesley Hardin. And seeing a guy that big win horse races is incredible. There are enough problems with the character itself, but having to dig out from under such a miscasting is a huge burden for this film. A deeply unlikable main character, played by an incredibly likable leading man, was a bad choice here. Number 2, the romances. Neither woman really believed in Wes, and I'm surprised they got caught so deeply in his web. And the women in the movie and the relationships he had with them weren't similar enough to the real-life versions. In reality, Janie and Wes did get married, and she died while he was in prison. And Rosie was a prostitute friend of his who actually figured indirectly into his own murder. The movie makes it seem like Wes's life was dominated by his love and willingness to sacrifice for these women. But that's neither true in reality nor believable within the context of the film. 3. John Wesley Hardin was a total jerk, in life and in the movie. Making some lionized version of him, especially holding him up as some pro-South, post-Civil War type, just ugh. The real Hardin was a killer, a racist, and a drunk, and turning him into a guy who just had the bad luck of having to kill people in self-defense only, and always got shot in the back, and then gets a happy ending, which Hardin didn't. It's a bit much to take. This is a watch, barely. There are worse westerns, sure, but this one does too many things wrong, including having a very unlikable main character, played by a matinee idol. I place this below Rope of Sand, in 4th place overall for me. Okay, you're up.
Okay, so my pros. 1. How most of the film was Wes's book from the beginning. The fact that it was a memory movie. I like that it began with him getting out of jail and handing over the book about his life, and then most of the movie was what he had written, and then eventually circling back to the present time and him going home. I thought it was a good mix of the past and present in the film. 2. The confrontation between Wes and Dirk Hanley. I feel like most, or at least a fair amount, of one-on-one showdowns in westerns have a similar sort of look and setting about them. Walking down a sort of deserted street with perfect weather, that sort of thing. But this one was different in that it was super windy. Dust was blowing everywhere, so it was hard to see. Hanley's hat flies away, and the two continued to stare each other down. Now, I wish it had been a little less one-sided in Wes's favor, but I still enjoyed it. 3. Everyone aside from Wes Hardin. He was just so unlikable that I found myself purposely paying more attention to all of the other characters. They were all very interesting and very well performed. I especially liked the uncle and the coroner. Now my cons. 1. Wes Hardin. He was unbelievably selfish and self-centered. He went on and on about how he killed some people, but he didn't murder them, all while actively creating situations where he would have the opportunity to shoot someone. It was ridiculous that he was trying to come across as a hero, aside from the villain he was. I absolutely hated him. Plus, while I enjoyed Rock Hudson, I didn't really buy him in the role after I found out the real Wes Hardin was only 15 when he shot his first victim. 2. Wes and Rosie. I didn't really buy their romance, and honestly, I just felt really bad for Rosie. She actually loved him, while he was just totally no-selling everything because he was so hung up on Jane. He definitely did not deserve all of the help and loyalty Rosie gave him. 3. The farm. Wes was always talking about getting his precious farm since the very first scene, and then he finally got it. I think we were supposed to be happy for him or something. At that point, he was so unlikable that I didn't think he even deserved the farm, and I certainly didn't feel happy for him. Now, this one was a bit tough for me. I hated literally everything about the main character, but I kind of liked the movie itself as a whole. It's definitely not the worst movie I've ever seen, but the entire movie was trying to make it come across like Wes Hardin was this great, hard-done-by dude, when he was just an unrepentant murderer.
Wow, that's an intense take. Is this then a watch or a don't watch for you?
Gonna have to say don't watch.
Wow, and where do you put it in our master list?
I would say 4th place as well. It wasn't quite as bad as Ghost of Frankenstein, but not nearly as good as Rope of Sand.
You know, I was thinking about what you said, liking the movie, but not liking the main character. I wonder if this film counts as a bit of a subset of the Burt Lancaster paradox. Obviously, it's not about the actor playing the character, but the character himself. But I wonder if the rules apply.
I think you might be onto something there.
We might have to expand the definition. Something to think of for next time. All right, that concludes our look at The Lawless Breed.
And with it, the end of episode 5. Remember, if you have any thoughts on this episode, be sure to drop them in the comments below.
We would love to reply to some comments. Got an idea for a film you'd like to hear us talk about? Let us know that too.
Ooh, fan request. That would be fun.
Well, we would need fans first.
We're working on it.
And as always, if you enjoyed what you heard, don't keep it to yourself.
Tell your friends.
Tell your enemies.
You never know. They might like Westerns as much as you do.
Maybe even more. For Sam the Sidekick, I'm Derek, and I love old movies. Sound effects used for I Love Old Movies, the podcast, come from freefx.co.uk. Images are found through the Creative Commons, and our theme song, Burning Bridges, comes from The Crux.